If you're relaunching or leveling up your YouTube channel, stay tuned as I go over the exact cameras, mics, and lighting that I use for all my YouTube channels. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ryan, and I'm gonna go over the cameras, the mics, and the lighting that I use for my YouTube channel. I relaunched my channel in October, and wanna go over a few things that I use. Now, just a disclaimer, if you are starting out, you can simply just start off with the equipment that you have. You do not have to rush out and go buy any of the equipment that I'm using. This is just the equipment that I have gained over the years doing YouTube, videography, and the stuff that I do in my personal life. So don't feel pressured. One of the biggest things that made me really into videography and starting this YouTube channel was using my iPhone. And the iPhones today, this is my iPhone right here. It's the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and it does excellent filming, recording, and you can connect different mics to it. And it's the camera that I actually use for most of my B-roll just because it's really easy to move around. Now, just a disclaimer, starting off, the camera that I'm using right now is not my normal camera that I use for YouTube, but the camera that I'm using right now is the Sony FX3. It's a full frame camera, uses full frame lenses. However, it's not the main camera that I use for YouTube. I seldomly use this camera, but the main workhorse for what I use for my YouTube channel is the Sony FX3, which is, I would say, like the baby brother of the FX3. So the Sony FX3, the reason why I use this camera, one, it is just easier to just set up, and I can use this also as a webcam, which is something I can't do with this Sony FX3. I know there is a way to do it, but it's a little bit more than simply plugging in the USB-C and having your computer recognize it as a webcam. So that's really the main thing. Also, the lenses for the Sony FX3 are definitely more affordable than the FX3 because it's not a full frame camera. The lens that I use with this is actually the Sigma 16mm f1.4, I believe. Let me just double check. It is pretty much my main YouTube lens. It does an amazing job with the bokeh or the blurry background. It seems very sharp when it comes to autofocus and focusing when I'm doing talking head videos, and really a staple when it comes to using it for that wider, I would say, wider frame. It is, once you know how to use it and set it up, it's a great camera. I literally just set it and forget it. That makes it easier for my workflow, especially if I'm filming multiple videos in a week. It's just easy and nice to set up. Now, I do have a cage on here, and the reason why I have a cage on here is I do a little bit of gimbal work as well, so it just makes it easier to put it into the gimbal. And also attachments. So when I have, let's say, a monitor, I can put it right on top, or mics, I can also put it on the cage, and it's easy to just slide in and out. But this does have great 4K footage. I do, for this camera, use Cine EI. I film in log, and I do use LUTs as well to really dial in the kind of look I'm looking for. But for YouTube, I'm not really too concerned. This is one of the cameras that I use for my YouTube channel. The second camera that I have, especially if I'm doing live streams and I'm wanting a 2-camera setup, is actually the Sony A7 IV. This has been a great staple. Again, it is 4K, easy to work with, and it is a Sony camera. So it uses the same lenses from my Sony FX3, and it is a full frame camera. So the lens that I use with this camera is actually the 24 millimeter GM 1.4 lens that I will use this as well. And what's nice about the A7 IV, similar to the Sony FX3, I can also use this as a webcam. I can plug it in through USB-C. It will recognize it on my Mac and use it as a webcam. So even if I'm doing a 2-camera setup for live, I actually just plug them through into my computer through USB-C. And I use the software OBS Studio to run all my live streaming and have it set up so I can have each scene with each camera when I want to change the angle. So those are the 2 cameras that I use as the majority. I would say 95% of the time I'm using the Sony FX3, the Sony A7 IV, and typically for B-roll, just so it's nice and easy, I do use whatever iPhone I'm using at the time. And this year I'll be using the iPhone 17 Pro Max for most, if not all, my B-roll. Okay. Let's switch over to mics. So mics, I feel, is super, super important for YouTube, and mainly because, you know, when it comes to cameras, and let's say you're using your iPhone, or you're using a really expensive camera, or not an expensive camera, a lot of people can forgive the video quality from 4K, 1080p, 720. And if you're seeing a lot of this on a smaller screen, audio is going to be very important to get your message across and listening to what you have to say. So when you have really bad audio, it's very difficult, even though you have an amazing picture or really bad picture, regardless of what that is, to move on to another video with a similar topic and maybe not as good content, but has better audio. So when it comes to audio, I do have a bunch of mics that I have in my arsenal, but the 2 mics that I'm going to be using most in 2026 and most likely beyond is this mic that I'm using right now, which is the Shure SM7B. It is a mic that I use for my podcast. This is kind of a specialty mic. I typically reserve this just for my audio. When it comes to videography work, I do have other mics, Audio Technica, and various Shure, not the Shure SM7B, but different other mics that I use as well for my videography work. When it comes down to my office and to my personal projects, I have this set up at my desk right here. Don't typically move it, and it's connected to my Rodecaster Duo. In times where I want some flexibility, I am also using the Rode Wireless Pro. So the Rode Wireless Pro, what's nice about it, it does come with 2 mics, and you connect the receiver to the camera. And I use this in various ways. One, I can just put it underneath my shirt or my sweater, etc. if I'm moving around or don't want to have a mic in my scene. And it's 32-bit float as well. So when I'm recording on here and bringing it over for post, I know I'm not going to be too worried about peaking or anything, that I'll be able to edit that audio in post, which is nice. They're easy to travel with. So if I'm doing a video that is outside of the office, it is something that's really good. And if I like to do if I wanted to hold a mic but didn't necessarily want to use the Shure SM7B, I will connect the Rode Wireless Pro with the Interview Go, and then you put the cover right on top, and then you're good to go. So if you've seen some of my past videos, I do use these in my videos, as well as the Shure SM7B. Now, I do have a boom mic. I have a Rode NTG5. And just with setup and everything like that, and in the room that I'm in the past, the two mics that I'd use the most would be the Rode NTG5 and the Shure SM7B. But because the room that I'm in, and I'm working on it for 2026, is more of an open space and has a lot more echo in the room versus my old studio. So having something like the Shure SM7B helps just reduce that echo. And because I'm also recording in a 32-bit float, kind of help control and reduce the amount of echo. However, because of the room that I'm in, there is quite a bit of echo that I'm working with. So again, two main mics that I'll be using, that I do use and will be using, is the Shure SM7B, as well as the Rode Wireless Pro. Okay, so now we're gonna go to lighting. Now, lighting is super important because depending on the camera that you have and where you are filming, a lot of cameras struggle with low light. And the Sony FX3, the Sony A7 IV, even the Sony FX3 will have challenges in low light situations, especially in the kind of type of filming that you're doing. So lighting a scene is going to be one of the most important things outside of audio. If I was going to kind of take a look at where I was going to spend my money in, if I was a new YouTuber, would be, hey, I'm going to be using the phone that I have. Next would be some sort of iPhone holder, tripod, etc. And then the next thing would be audio. You know, typically I would probably do a wireless setup with the new phones today, because most of the new phones today are USB-C, and you're going to get good quality from a wireless set. Doesn't necessarily have to be the Rode Wireless Pro. And then third most important is going to be lighting. Lighting that I'm using Amaran 200DS. It is a daylight, so it doesn't change colors or anything like that. And I do have it in a softbox. The softbox that I'm using is the SMALLRIG RAD85. And then I do use a grid as well, which is included on a light stand. So that is on a C stand, sorry, light stand, C stand. That's what I'm using for my setup, and literally stays in one spot. And I have it lit, turn it off when I'm not using it. And I'm really, for what I'm filming right now, I think this is at maybe 8% brightness. And you can control the light a little bit better. So you're lighting your subject, and let's say your background, you want a little bit darker, those type of things, you can take the grid off. But for me, just for the style of talking head that I like, I use the grid. And for the light behind me is my backlight. And this one, I'm gonna have to put on the screen. I've had this light for a long time. It literally is just a panel light, and that I really wanted to get for my setup at my desk for Microsoft Teams, Zoom, etc. Specifically for a time where I was on a lot of conference calls during the pandemic. I did purchase the grid separately, didn't come with it, but I'll put that all either on the screen or in the description below if you're interested. But these are basically the only two lights that I use to light me in my videos. Now for ambiance and for mood, I do have these lights over here that have a little bit of color. And these are they're hue lights. They're hue light bars. So again, I'll put the description. I'll add the links in the description below if you're interested. But with those, yes, I can control the color. I'm a little bit weary to recommend hue lights in general if you're going to have them in your scene. The reason why I'm okay with these ones, I don't see the same issues that I have with other hue lights. And if I do find it in filming, it's very minimal, is the light frequency from the hue lights, and most of the cameras are in different frequencies. So you see like this, I would say, intermittent movement of light going on and off in this grid, just because the frequency is not the same. So I wouldn't recommend having hue lights from my experience in your videos. If you go back to some of my videos, you'll know what I mean. So again, not a recommendation when filming. I'd probably be more focused, and if you're going to be using these lights, to have them far in the background and maybe not as bright. So if you see it in this scene, this key light is actually brighter than the ambiance light that I have in the scene. And then in post, do a little bit editing to just make some colors pop a little bit more. So for my YouTube channel, this is what I'm using when it comes to cameras, mics, and lighting. Hopefully you found some value in this video. If you have, please go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and comment below. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.